Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. I'm Troy Parkins, and I'm here with.
Janna Colasso, your friendly hypnotherapist. Happy Sunday, everybody.
And did you see I actually did that correctly this time I went? Because I realized it's the opposite.
You did. And notice I'm not gesticulating with my hands at all because, okay, like if you were us, you would see that Troy is on the opposite side. I'm on the opposite side. So it's not like looking in a mirror. It's very creepy. It's very weird and confusing. So it's like one over there is really over there kind of thing. And over there is over there. So what are you
It's
going
hard
to
to
do?
think about that.
Wait, it's above my pay grade.
Way above mine. I can't even think about those things.
No.
Oh, thinking. We're going to talk about thinking today.
Yes. Or the lack thereof being the popular choice for me these days.
True that. Now, one ongoing theme with HypnoTalk, with a lot of our episodes, is presence. So, in this episode, we're going to talk about how presence, thinking, or in your case, as you talked about today in Instagram, not thinking serves a person in whatever they want to accomplish, really. And of course, because we love tips and tricks, there are always tips and tricks at the end of the show. So,
Tips.
and tricks. Like tricks and treats in October, tips and tricks in July. And you're looking very, very summery, by the way. I like it. And we didn't coordinate again, black and white. It's an ongoing theme. We're just there. So,
Yeah, I'm summery whether I like it or not. I've been out in the sun a lot because we're gearing up for open water swim season, and we've got our biggest race of the year coming up Sunday after next. So I've been getting a lot of yards in the ocean, as well as the pool, and you can slather yourself with heavy sunscreen all you want, but the reflection off the water, even early in the morning, is enough to just, make me look like I'm outside all the time. But that's what that is.
you look very tan. You look very tan. You look like you just came back from Cabo San Lucas.
I wish. No.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay. So, that being said, if anybody has any questions, we're broadcasting live right now on YouTube. Just ask them in the comments. I'm monitoring that. Friends out there who are watching, give me a text. I know you're out there, and I know that you're afraid to ask questions, but we invite you. We do not bite. Janna does not bite. She's very friendly hypnotherapist, as a matter of fact. So, stop thinking. What do you have to say about thought and thinking? And can you really stop thinking?
Yes, one can. And I would have I think the biggest thing for me, the biggest addiction nowadays that I help people with is the addiction to thinking.
And I love that. The addiction to thinking.
And when I first tried to stop, I started to listen to Eckhart Tolle a lot. And as I've mentioned on here before, I'm in a training with him, becoming a teacher of presence, because I'm always adding to the repertoire of tools in my Hypno Toolbox to help people. And one of the things that Eckhart is really good at is quieting the mind and being present. And if you've ever read his book, it's The Power of Now. It sounds, and we can intellectually, in a thinking way, understand that there's value in not thinking. But where I had issues was actually trying to put that into practice. So one of the things that I started to do at first to stop thinking was to take a nice meditative walk. So I would harness up the dog and take big long walks. And this was especially nice in the spring. There's some kind of wooded areas near my house and some beautiful trails and lakes and wildlife and wildflowers and that sort of thing. And I noticed that most days, even if things were going well in my life, I was not able to stop thinking for more than just, if I was lucky, 3 to 5 seconds at a time.
And
No
what did it
matter
look
how
like
hard
when
I
you
tried.
did what did it look like when you stopped thinking? Like, what does that mean? I don't think I've ever stopped thinking.
There's layers of it. When I had some extended time of stopping thinking, the present moment became particularly vibrant and I'm not one who's done drugs, but vibrant in a way that friends of mine who have done drugs describe everything around me becoming incredibly alive and wisdom and insights flowing in, and a deep sense of comfort, a deep feeling of peace. And it had to do with, let's pretend like you are a bamboo flute. If the flute is clogged, when the breath of life, I'm going to get airy fairy here, but let's say that you could call it God or presence or the universe or energy or just awareness, can't make it through to you because you're clogging your flute with thinking. I used to wonder what spiritual types meant when they talked about aware presence or being awakened. The funny thing is, I believe most spiritual types that I've met aren't actually awake. They're just part of a good old boys club that's starting to form, that's becoming the next fundamentalist religion. But all that aside,
And they know how to use this crazy lingo and explain things and wave their hands.
yeah,
I hear you. Preach
but
on, sister.
that's not what I'm talking about. I have a good friend, and I've known her for years. She was the teacher of my kids when they were toddlers. Uh, and we've remained close all these years. And she and I used to live in the same neighborhood. And she always laughed hysterically because she would see me driving in my car, and she might be walking out for a walk, and she'd be at a stoplight and I was at the stoplight, and she'd wave at me and yell, "Hey, Janna," and I wouldn't see her because my mind had drifted off to something totally unrelated.
You're on autopilot, maybe,
Yeah.
right?
And so
Thinking.
that would be akin to being asleep. So it's like daydreaming. And most of us are daydreaming all the time, sometimes really deeply like that, where we're not even noticing what's going on around us. And sometimes just a little bit. We may be noticing what's going on around us, but we're still concerned about some situation. So that anytime we're involved in the process of thought, our attention is there. And if we imagine that our pure attention is the real essence of who we are, so if the real essence of who I am, which is just simply my attention, nothing more, it doesn't have anything to do with my personality or my karma or my gifts or my learnings or anything. It's just pure awareness. It's just where it's the flashlight that is focusing on the topic. So if who I am is focusing on the topic of whatever I'm thinking about, it's not also focusing on where I am and what I'm doing. Now, some people aren't quite as myopic as I, and I've got some of them as children. They can multitask and they can kind of focus on a lot of stuff at once. But still, studies have shown that all that really is going back and forth really, really fast. You can step away and get a broader picture and still include thought in presence. And ultimately, that's the goal, is to be able to anchor in the present moment and be very absorbed and have the bulk of your attention on what's unfolding now, and only a fragment involved in thought. And the goal is having the control to be able to notice when you're turning thought on and off, and to always know and be in the driver's seat, so to speak, of your thoughts. Now, what I found out on my nature walks early on was that I wasn't in control, because I would say, okay, I'm going to be present come hell or high water. And I would look at the scenery. I would focus on what there was to smell and touch and hear, and the sounds and all of it. And within seconds, I was in my head trying to figure out what I was going to say to my next client when they came in, and how I was going to help them through their issue, or whether I was right or wrong about my mother, or any other number of things. And so the momentum of my thinking habit had gotten like when you're on the teacups at Disneyland and you're going really, really fast. And you know, there's that wheel right in the center of the car, and you're pulling on it and pulling on it and pulling on it. And then it doesn't take much effort to pull on it. It just kind of goes, and all it takes is a little pull. And there's a lot of momentum for that car to spin around and around and around.
Whoa, I remember that ride.
Spinning is representing my thinking. My habit is thinking, and the thinking is just happening. Now, if I try to stop the thinking, have you ever decided to slow that car down? What happens? If you're a
then
child,
you start thinking more.
It rips your arms out. And Dad says what? He says, I'll turn the car around. And so he'll say, Dad used to say, don't touch it. Because as a child, I couldn't even grab the wheel. I would just be thrown by the momentum, right? And Dad would take all his strength and he would start to move it. And I could hear him, pulling on that wheel. And eventually it would slow down. And then the car would stop. And then gradually it would start to spin the other direction. And then it didn't take Dad all that much energy. Now he would let me put my hands back on the wheel, and now it would start spinning the other way. So the thinking mind is just like that.
That's a great analogy.
It's hard to stop it. And it takes that much strength and that much commitment and that much practice. And I think the biggest point I want to get across is, don't give up. It won't always be so hard. Now, I've been practicing presence like that. It's taken me about 3 years of doing that every day, multiple times a day, to get it to turn. And it's just now starting to spin the other way. And I've got to tell you, if there's one thing that makes a difference in your life, it's that. It's everything. It's worth, if it took me 20 years of daily struggle, I'd do it. The payoff is bigger than you can possibly imagine.
Which is why it comes up in our conversations a number of times. Presence, being able to really regulate and drive your emotions as well. You talk about being in the driver's seat of your thoughts. Yes. Again, being present drives those emotions. And you and I have talked about this. I'm binge watching Better Call Saul, and I love that show.
Me too.
And there was a scene in there when Jimmy's brother, right? He has that kind of, he thinks he's being bombarded by, electricity. And he's freaking out, but he's practicing presence. So he's walking through a supermarket saying yellow banana, green grapes, blue shirt, triangle sign, and bringing himself into the present moment. But there's also a further part of that in not then spinning out of control like you talked about in the Disney teacup example. So I find that very fascinating and a very awesome example, Jim.
Yeah. And when Chuck was walking through the store and he was saying that, what was so relatable to this conversation for me was you could tell how much energy and strength it took and commitment and a decision that no matter what, he was going to go to the store, he was going to pull off this task, he was going to do it. And it was so challenging for him to be able to slow down the momentum of his thinking mind. It's almost as though the thoughts are thinking you.
Mm-hmm.
Rather
You
than,
know, we could get super, super philosophical in that, you know, this is for another show, but we could talk about, are you really your thoughts? Where do your thoughts come from? I like to use the analogy of a computer where you have ROM, that's read-only memory, and then you also have RAM, which is random access memory. So all of your computer programs are your RAM, and that's what runs Chrome. That is what runs YouTube right now. But your ROM is just programmed. That's what turns your OS on. That's what, you know. So we could get really deep on that. But I believe that's for another time. And that could be potentially a time that buffalo milk or, you know, perhaps something else is introduced into the loop, because it's just very philosophical conversations where there's no right or wrong. There's no good or bad. It's all just there.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, well, that being said, very, very, yeah, what Chuck was going through was so like, he was not only working to control his thoughts from flying off into all this electricity is bombarding me, to then also the fear that was coming up in him to not freak out. So there again, presence or thinking, being present prevents this, even thoughts of the future or the past, because you're present.
Yes. And presence, there's the thinking mind. The mind can't grasp or understand the value because it's an experiential state of being that doesn't involve thinking. So there's no content that someone could teach you about what it feels like to be present. I can sort of describe my experience, but they all just end up being thoughts. And it doesn't really end up in a package that someone can swallow and say, oh, there's value. So, because it's the absence of thinking. So when I first started my hypnotherapy practice, I knew about presence. And one of the ways and reasons hypnosis works so well, it's because it's a state of presence. So before we even do anything, quieting the mind, putting someone into a deep theta brainwave state creates presence. And so that's part of why John Kappas, who's the father of modern hypnotherapy, said that you could read someone the phone book in hypnosis and they would get tremendous value from it, because for a while they're completely present. The physical body relaxed, the mind is calm, and there's quite a bit of value just in that state. And they've done studies have shown that the state of hypnosis is equivalent to a certain amount of sleep, and I forget the number, but a few minutes of hypnosis equals a lot more sleep. It may be like a 1-to-5 ratio or something to that effect.
I don't know how many of our viewers out there right now have been hypnotized. I have, from a very, very, very friendly and awesome hypnotherapist.
How friendly?
A very, very friendly, and everybody's friendly hypnotherapist, not just mine, everybody's. And she really knows her shit too. Can I say that? Her.
You said shit.
And guess what? When I woke up and when I did, we had a few sessions. It was like I had the best sleep ever. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy. And I'm speaking from I. However, it's probably very similar with other people, right?
It is. And and I've evolved too. So old school, the way I started to do it was putting people into a state of hypnosis and then helping them find better thoughts. So if they had a negative thinking habit, like that they were unworthy, for example, you could put in a lot of suggestions for worthiness. So you would talk about better ideas. You know, you're not bad, you're good. You're not fat, you're skinny. You're not this, you're that. And it became, but it was still content. In other words, I was giving content rather than taking thinking out. So most of my practice now is less, we still accomplish the goal, but positivity is the natural state of being. Don't believe me? Look at the newborn babies when they're just in neutral without a belief system. Their natural state is happy. So you're going to float up like a cork floats to the surface when we get the thinking to stop. The problem is a lot of people will still, and I'm including myself in this, very skeptical about letting go of some of that thinking. It feels like loss of control, and that's scary. And the mind won't understand that it's going to be safe if it stops thinking. It believes that it needs to continue to think, but it doesn't. It's actually the wisdom that is wanted. And I've talked about this a lot, and it starts to get confusing when I translate it into words, because knowledge and wisdom, it sounds like potato, like, come on, what are you talking about? But if you think again about a hollow bamboo flute, if we remove the contents, then there's open possibilities in there. There's room for a deeper deepening. And deeper deepening, I think the drug addicts will understand, although it's not exactly the same. Masters that have grasped being in the thoughtless state, and I don't mean thoughtless like you're zonked out, like you're like, don't know what's going on. I mean thoughtness like alert presence. Like if you watched a bird, they're present. They're very aware of everything
They are
that's
pretty
happening.
aware.
So is your dog.
Too.
Okay.
Yes.
So is a cat.
Especially when they're beaming up to their alien bosses.
That's neither here nor there. I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. But the aware presence is present. It's aware, it's alert, it's awake. So if you're thinking about, for example, and I'm using the word thinking, I don't have other words to describe it, but what people who have meditated for years, or yogis that are renowned like Paramahansa Yogananda, those types, they're talking about a thoughtless realm, and then a tremendous deepening of abilities, a deepening of perception, a feeling of connection, a seeing that there's an aliveness in everything. And it's far from boring. At first, when I tried to be present on some of these nature walks, I got really bored with it. My mind wanted to listen to a podcast instead.
Yeah.
And my mind's pretty sneaky. It'll go, let's listen to Eckhart Tolle podcast. Now, but it's still content. Even though he's talking about these topics, it was still something for my mind to quote unquote do. And that was fine. So there are levels of this. It's fine at first to start having there be positive thoughts rather than negative thoughts. That's one layer of it. It inadvertently tells the mind that there's more than one potential outcome to the problem, right? It might be positive. It doesn't have to go just this one negative way, right? So now the mind is a little more open. That bamboo flute is a little more cleaned out. Then it might be listening to a guided meditation or having some hypnotherapy or listening to some Eckhart Tolle. It's not complete presence, but it's another step. And there can then be these glimmers of moments. And we don't want to have the expectation that we're going to get anywhere, because if you have the expectation that eventually, if you do this long enough, you'll get it, which I also said. So it also sounds like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but it's because our languaging is so limited. We want to constantly remember that it's not something to achieve tomorrow or next month or next year once we've meditated enough, because that's an expectation. It's always available right now. It's only available right now. It's never available tomorrow.
Right, exactly now. Not tomorrow. Yeah, not yesterday.
It's right now, in wherever you're sitting, touch your chair. It's in this chair. It's in this moment. And when the future comes, it always comes as the present. We're never, ever, ever not in today. It's always today. It's never not been
just
today.
Blew my mind. You just blew my mind. You Doc Browned me right there.
Yeah.
You're right.
And
we are never living in the future or the past.
Or the past. They're only mind constructs.
True that.
Here's my favorite thing to do with clients. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
I want you, now we just talked about there is no past, but you've got a memory bank of other present moments that you've been in. So close your eyes for a second and bring to mind one of the favorite moments of your life. And trust me, everybody can do this. It doesn't have to be deep and profound. It could be a great pizza you had once. Of course it could be
In and out last week.
Yeah. So you look at a moment that was deeply moving, like if you were dying, that day that moment would have been something that you'll never forget. There's a lot of them. But let's say you had an assignment where you had to write down 3 of those or 5 of those. And let's say you out there in YouTube land, yes, you're also noticing those moments. And don't get caught up on what if you forgot the most important ones. Doesn't matter. Any of them will do. Those were moments where you were present. Because nothing like that can ever happen when we're in thought.
That was a magician type of trick right there. You were like on America's Got Talent. You were that wow magician right there. That is some drop the mic, good knowledge.
This is like, you know what this is as big as? This is as big as when, who was it, Ptolemy, who used to think that the earth was the center of the universe? Or who was it? It was somebody else. I forget. But it was back in the day, of course they thought that the sun moves around the earth. It comes up and over there and it goes down over there and everything spins around the earth. And then they realized, no, the earth is spinning around the sun. So the illusion is, you look at what happens outside every day looks exactly the same. But we realize that it's like going to the drive-through car wash. You ever done that? And then
I love those.
And then all of a sudden you slam on the brake because it feels like the car is moving, and you realize the car's not moving. It's the equipment that's moving around the car. But it feels like it's the car moving. And there's some rides at Disneyland, like the Star Wars ride does that too. Where it feels like the whole audience is moving, but it's not. The whole audience is right there. It's the illusory stuff is moving. That's what the present moment is. It's the stable. And it's the world of form that's flowing around. Now, you don't have, your mind will want to get this and go like the emoji, the brain explode emoji, and the mind can't quite get it. And the best part is that we don't want the mind to get it. because that's just more thinking. We want to experience everything that the present moment gives. And that's not, Angelico, seriously? Seriously?
She's very present.
Yeah, he's going crazy because my kids are out there being wild and he feels like he has to stop them. They're screaming and yelling and fighting but giggling. So they're, my kids are adults, but they still act like they're toddlers.
That's good.
Yeah, and they're
Young
doing
at
it out
heart.
there. Yeah.
So that being said, I created a challenge.
Okay.
Janna's challenge. This is what we're going to say to our viewers out there. Janna's challenge is to come up with your top 3 greatest moments in your life, and then realize what is the magic behind this, Janna. Those top 3 moments of your life equate to:
you were present. It was a time when you were present. You weren't lost in thinking about the future or the past. You were also not worrying about anything. You weren't in your head daydreaming about anything. You were in your body. You were only concerned with what you were experiencing in that specific moment. And I would like to throw out there in the whole shifting of perspectives, and this is something else that the present moment is, it's timeless. When you can stop thinking, you're still in every moment you ever had. You're still with every person you've ever loved. It's not the past anymore. Now, this, I'm afraid I'm saying this, and it's going to actually, I'm trying to motivate you by giving you a good reason to push through the pulling on the wheel of the teacup. Where I'm shooting you in the foot by doing that is giving you an expectation that when you're present, that's all of a sudden everything's gonna, there are layers of this. And we want to know that the present moment you're in now continuously looks different. And you were sitting in the chair you're sitting in yesterday, but when you were there, that was the present moment. And where you have physically been has always been now. The only difference between tomorrow and now, from the perspective of where you were yesterday, is that you're actually in your body, not in your mind thinking about tomorrow. You're actually in tomorrow, which is now, from the perspective of yesterday. Are you following me? So
I am.
But the mind starts to go into it goes into what I go into when I try to read Stephen Hawking. Like, I get it, I don't get it, my brain's going to explode. It's because the mind, luckily we don't have to understand it. In fact, it's a matter of letting go of thought, letting go of thought, letting go of thought, letting go of thought. And when you get good at it, it gets better. So as you start to slow the wheel of thinking down, and it's very challenging at first for most people. It was for me. I find the fact that I've been able to get control over my thinking a miracle, because I believe that I was about this close to lost in thought permanently, which is insanity, literal insanity. And that I was able to stop that is quite miraculous. But the value of it becomes bigger and bigger. Now the wheel of my teacup at Disneyland is starting to spin the other way, and presence becomes easier and easier and easier and easier and easier. And so, but with that comes letting go of thought, which is really ego death. If you think about it, there can't be there's a lot of things. It's letting go of attachment. But if we start to philosophize it and talk about it, every word form becomes a thought form. And that's doing the exact opposite of what we want to do. What we want to do is simpler than that. What we want to do is clean the flute out and keep an open channel.
Yes. And there are like monuments of work, piles and piles of work done on this whole concept of not being, not turning your mind off, basically.
Yes.
Now, the tip or the challenge, I guess you could say it's a challenge because it will show a person. And I did this exercise just now. I was present to what you were saying, and then I was also present to my challenge. And then you are absolutely correct. I thought of all three of those present, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, there is, like I said, like tons of work on this. So we're at the surface. We scratched the surface. Very good stuff. I believe, and I make this up, that we will be having many more segments of this, of ways to turn that ROM computer, I'd say off. It can never turn off.
Here's what I want to do. I'm talking about this in general terms. I want real life questions from real life normal human beings who are having trouble getting their thoughts to calm down, because it's quite easy to have a conversation that makes a difference and help. Sometimes you need a little bit. Sometimes you're like me. When I was a child, I needed dad to grab that wheel because there's no way. The momentum was too crazy. So sometimes we need just someone to point out how to do it. And sometimes that's unique for each individual, depending on what's up for them. Does that, so what I might say to one person is very different than what I might say to somebody else. On a strategy for that person to be able to be willing to let it go.
But everyone's different. We're not a cookie cutter. Like, boop.
Yeah.
We're all unique.
Yeah.
So I will say, if you watching out there want some support of someone, moving that teacup circular guidance tool, I don't even know what that thing's called, but whatever that is, I know a person who is there to help you, and that's your friendly hypnotherapist, Janna Troy. And follow her on Instagram. All that information's right here, and give a subscribe. We want to break 50 subscriptions. So let's go. Let's do it, because lots of good knowledge being dropped right here. As always, Janna, a great pleasure. Lots of great knowledge. And any closing words?
You could order The Power of Now if you haven't read it. I read it when it first came out back years ago, and I enjoyed it then, and then it went on the bookshelf. And then when I read it again, I was in a different place, and it made a big difference. And then I read it again, and I was in a different place. And so this is a process. Some people have a big breakthrough all at once, but those are rare. The rest of us mere mortal beings work at it, but it's not so hard. Don't give up. It's only challenging at first, and eventually there will be some momentum that starts to rocket the other way. And it applies to everything. Every challenge, every upset feeling can be transcended with this. It's a magical thing.
I definitely align to that, Ms. Janna. All right. Thank you all for joining us. Janna, as always, brilliant. You're amazing. And I'll see you next week. We'll see you guys next week too. Peace.